Howdy back. Welcome back to the Band of Otters podcast. Thanks for joining us again today, you beautiful people. Today we have Grant Estill, and Grant is a fitness competitor. He is a bodybuilding physique competitor, and he can tell us maybe a little more specifically exactly what he does, what areas he competes in, and just a little more detail about him and his coaching endeavors as well. So Grant and I knew each other back a long time ago now when we used to work at Gold's Gym, whenever I guess we first started getting more serious into the lifting world. And so thanks for taking some time on today's Sunday to join us, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, man. I think we met whenever we were actually setting up, Gold's Gym Tower Point, and you had a just completely outrageous, overly aggressive mohawk and beard combo going, and you scared the hell out of me a little bit.
That was hell yeah. I forgot that was the thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm a men's physique competitor. I've competed since 2016. I think we started work together around like that 2017 year, but competed since then, competed at the national level, kind of fought for the pro card last year, and then taking a little bit of a break just because my girlfriend's doing law school. So I dove really deep into coaching. And so that's pretty much where my primary focus is right now.
How many clients do you currently have?
Right now I'm sitting at, I have 3 that are actually like in competition prep. The rest of my, I would say like 12 are just kind of like either lifestyle or going through a off season right now. And then I probably have a handful of like 5 or 6 others that are just strictly posing, that I work on and off with.
Damn, you have a lot of clients, dude.
I have a lot of clients. It's busy. It's busy.
How did you start finding online? I mean, I assume all of them are online.
Yep. There's a couple.
How did
Yeah, there's a couple here in town in Houston that I've met just because. So we moved out here for Taylor's law school, and I started working as a fitness manager at Crunch Fitness, and a couple of my employees needed help with posing, and so like I work with them in person, and then everybody else is just strictly online, and that comes from just my background, just competing. People ask me questions, and eventually we develop a relationship into turning into a coaching relationship. Or I've been blessed to be able to work with a couple like fitness influencers, so they have a pretty big following. And my most recent one, Mitri, he helped me out a lot because we took him to the national level, and so there were a lot of eyes on him, and people just started hitting me up because he started looking better and better, and I was like, yeah, pretty good at this.
We got some practice, and you come with a lot of experience, right? I mean, you did this for quite some time, and then finally started taking clients. What made you initially decide that this was going to be the sport of all sports to choose from? Why this one?
Yeah. So I started in baseball. Like that was my thing all the way through my whole life. Being a smaller guy, it was a lot more difficult. Not a lot more difficult, but it was just difficult, right? Going through getting ready for that, like college, like going to play college ball. It was all in 100%. And then out of nowhere, I had a couple of offers, and then I tore my meniscus, and my whole thing was I was fast. And so nobody wanted to put their money on a fast guy with a bum knee. So all those, got pulled. So going into college, I was like, I have no idea what the hell I'm going to do with all this time on my hands, because I always had, extra time I was putting into baseball. So I actually tried powerlifting first. That was my first thing.
Very cool. I did not know that.
Yeah. Like I'm going to piss you and a lot of your followers off by saying I did not enjoy it one bit.
It's not for everybody. It's all right. I mean, you can be wrong too,
Yeah, exactly. But it was just like I enjoyed training, but it was like training heavy and then having to take 5 minutes in between. And it was very structured, almost like it was so meticulous. Like, just didn't really fit my vibe very much. So I decided to pull out of that. I was actually at UTSA, so it was who's the coach over there? It was man, he's a really big name in like Texas Strength System and stuff like that.
Zunker?
Yeah, Zonker.
Yeah.
And so I worked with him for a little bit. Great guy. But then, I started leaning over towards that bodybuilding style of training. I had no intentions of competing. But as, we got into it and my body started developing, started to see a little bit of shape come through, and then moved over to College Station. where there's a big fitness community, big bodybuilding community. And so I just had a lot of people tell me, like, dude, like you need to get on stage. So just went out on a whim and absolutely loved it. You know, I'm somebody who struggled with like that, like stage fright, being like in the spotlight. Did not like it at all, but just for whatever reason in that setting, I just love it, man. I love the presentation. I love the training. So that's just kind of how I got into it.
You seem to be pretty damn good at it. I mean, just looking at the pictures on your Instagram,
Yeah.
I think your second one where we have a vacuum. Your vacuum is insane, man. Like, obviously you found a passion, but I mean, don't you think that my perception is that bodybuilding is also fairly meticulous, and it takes like just like powerlifting, where it's like your diet, your sleep, all these things. It's also fairly meticulous, no?
Yes, 100%. It's just in a different way. So like, whereas powerlifting, it's like your program is set almost like from what I understand. That's at least how it was for us at like a beginner level. Was like the next like 3-4 months of your life for training is like, you know what it's going to be, and that's
Yeah.
it, right? When it comes down to bodybuilding, it's very day by day. Starting off in prep, you know, it's more so week by week, to where you structure your diet plan. This is where we're going to stick to. This is the level of intensity we're going to stick to. This is the cardio we're going to stick to. Run that for, 7 days, and let's see how your body responds. And it's all based off of stimulus and reaction. And so it's very, very touchy. So, for example, like when I had Mitri through this last prep, he was changing within the last 3 weeks. I mean, it was hourly. Man, I knew exactly how much food I needed to give him on peak week based off of the 3 weeks prior. So I would give him a big amount of carbohydrates for a little bit of a refeed, and the dude would just blow up. But he had a little bit of water retention. So then I had to take that data, go into peak week and say, okay, I can feed him, but how much can I really feed him until he starts to hold that water? And then we ran into issues of, trying to make weight, because when he went to go get measured for his height, he's been 6 foot his whole life. And for some reason they measured him at 5'11" 3/4. So he had to drop another 12 pounds in one day. So it's just like, it's very structured and meticulous, but like there's things that can happen to where the body just responds to certain stimuli, and then you got to think on your feet, and it's all very just seconds that make the difference.
A quarter of an inch made that big of a difference,
Bro.
with his weight class?
Yeah, so it was the most nightmarish day of my like bodybuilding experience, like not just coaching, but like any person I've been a part of, whether it be a friend stepping on stage, my client, or me stepping on stage, it was the most nightmarish experience. So we had him registered for Class C, and so that's going to be it was under 6 foot, and so he had to be 212, right? And so he got up there, and no, sorry, he was registered for Class D, and so that was 6 foot and over. They measured him as Class C because he was 5'11" 3/4. So that quarter of an inch took him down to the lower weight class. And so I told him, I was like, dude, okay, go hang from a pull-up bar for like an hour and see if you can decompress your spine and like make it to 6 foot. But he was like, no, like I can do it. I can make it happen. I can make weight. And I was like, okay. So I gave him a protocol to where, he was doing an hour, or not an hour. He was doing 20 minutes cardio, at a very high intensity. And then he was going and sitting in the sauna for 10 minutes. And then he would have 10 minutes of rest. And he was going through that. He did it about 6 times before he finally made weight. Then he went back, measured him again, same thing, 5'11" 3/4, and he made weight by, he had to be 212, he was 211.8. And they ended up putting him in Class D anyway. See, that's what I'm saying. So
What?
yes, so this man like went through all this struggle, and went on, competed in Class D to where he was significantly now undersized, completely depleted. So like when he was up on stage, he was having trouble holding those poses. if he would have competed in Class C, he would be a pro today. No doubt in my mind. With the amount of size, muscle maturity that he has at such a young age, like he would have been top two in Class C. But
Like, why would they end up saying, "Hey, you're not going to compete in this class. Need you to drop weight now"? Hey, never mind. Sorry, you're perfectly fine. Thanks.
right. So that was my question. Like, what the hell are they talking about? So his conversation with them was, and he was in Orlando, and so I'm doing all this, virtually over the phone. And he was like, "Yeah, they just said that since I registered for Class D, that's the class that I have to compete in, even though I'm measured in Class C." And I was like, "No, that's bullshit." So I'm trying to get on the phone with somebody. So like I have a connection with Ed Pariso, and he's the Texas chairman for NPC in Texas. But I mean, he was like, "Dude, that's not my show." He's like, "I can give you some contacts." He's like, "But it's show day. Like they're not going to be able to talk to you." So ended up, we were just shooting in the dark, but we did what we could, and now we know we got to get ready for Class C, not Class D.
And so it's going to be from now on. Now he's just going to be permanently in Class C.
I'm hoping so, and that's the kind of shitty part with NPC is me. Like I've been measured at 5'3", I've been measured at 5'5", 5'4.5", and like I'm 5'4.5", dog. Like that's where that's every single time I measure. So
So then, what is the reason, or what's the cause for the variation? Because I mean, I would imagine if you're 5'3", you're 5'4.5" every single, whether you're in Texas or in Orlando, you're still 5'4.5", right? So
yeah,
why? How,
I,
what do they use different measuring systems? Like
yep.
the actual tools?
Yep, they use different measuring systems. Some of them are like the laser. Some of them are the actual, just like put them on your head. Um, but I have no idea how something so simple can be so consistently fucked up. It baffles me, man, because it's happened to him. I've had a couple friends that have done the same thing. Even at the pro level, like you see people like, oh, didn't make weight. It's like, the weight that you have to make, they're going to make that weight. It's like if they get measured differently and then they have to try and make weight after that. That's what's happening is they just keep measuring and it's off by give or take half an inch sometimes.
So how do the weight classes and heights work, right? Because they sound
Mm-hmm.
moderately similar to powerlifting, where you have like 8 different weight classes, but also significantly different.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go into detail on how those guys are different?
Yeah, so it differs by division. So the division that I compete in is men's physique. Men's physique is just height class. So, you know, typically class A is all your short guys, obviously. It's like 5'6" and under. So on stage, I weigh about 160. There could be somebody standing next to me at 200 or at a buck 20. It doesn't matter. It's just
Yeah.
whatever their height is. Yeah. And so that's where men's physique goes off that sweet spot of having a good amount of mass to you, but just 100% shredded and having a really, really good shape to you to where there's not a lot of posing to it, but you have to look good just standing still. Then you go up a division, that's classic physique, and that's where they really wanted to find a very like middle ground between that aesthetics of men's physique and then just massive bodybuilding to where they said, okay, there's going to be a height cap and a weight cap. So at certain heights, give or take, if you're, for example, Mitri that I had, he's, 5'11" and 3/4. So he would be in the class of under 6 foot. Um, and so he has to be, 212. He could be anything under 212. He just can't be over. And then same thing, if someone's a little bit taller, they have a weight cap of it's like 226 or something like that. And so underneath 6'2", you have to be that weight. Bodybuilding is the biggest one to where that's not going off of height at all. It's just off of weight. So if I compete in a bodybuilding, I would be probably like featherweight. And so that's up to and including like 170, I believe. So I can get up to 170, but I can't go over. And so with bodybuilding, that's the most like mass monster type division. So you're looking at people with ranging in heights all over the place, but they're all the same weight.
Do you ever have a goal or plan to get to the point where you're doing bodybuilding stuff? Or do you want to stay in the physique world?
That was like an original goal of mine because I started off in classic physique actually, and I wanted to move up to bodybuilding, but just kind of seeing where my genetics were, open is just not on the cards for me. And so I think I could push it and go into classic, and I think it'd be fairly competitive in classic, but open is just a whole other ball game, man. There's way too much that goes into it that I want to be a part of. So
Like, do you mind going into detail exactly what is involved? Like, how does somebody get to weighing, 260 and still looking fucking shredded? Now, obviously, there's some PED use, right? That's
right.
pretty well accepted in the community, which I think is really oddly interesting because it's
Hmm.
federally illegal, but it's still like we know everybody kind of knows bodybuilders are kind of in that space. Is that where you're trying to stay away from?
Well, it's the amount, right? Um, because there's a fine line between like, yes, using it to enhance your physique, and there's the other part of that line where it's just that, okay, now you're just being a dumbass and you're just flooding yourself full of chemical warfare. You know what I mean? And I want no part of that. So for me to get that big, I would have to push stuff way over the line that I'm comfortable with, and and that's just because of more so my genetics. Because there are people that are just absolutely insanely huge, insanely strong that use very little, which is great. They can push their genetic potential to there. But I was at the point where I capped out at like 190, 192 in my off season, and being 5'4", like I was fairly thick, but
Yeah.
I was waking up at like 6, 7 a.m. to start eating, and I wasn't done eating until midnight, 2 a.m. It was 7, 8 meals a day, and it was just nonstop, 5,000 plus calories every single day, nonstop. Um, it was it was pretty intense, and so
Stressful.
yeah, so like adding that on top of it is just like knowing where I pushed it and then knowing where I'd have to push it in order to get there. It's like, dude, I'm gonna let y'all play the big man's game. I'm gonna play my game. That's it.
I mean, at least you knew where your boundary was and willing to accept that. Like
Exactly.
it's a pretty big thing for I think any lifter or any athlete. It's like, okay, this is where I am willing to go to because I think a lot of competitors are like the best. Got to do the most, got to do the best, got to push it, and it
Yep.
can lead to chemical warfare in your body.
Yes. And that's the most interesting thing in the sport right now, in my opinion, is because I was there at one point where I was like, dude, like I'm gonna be Mr. Olympia and I'm gonna do whatever it takes. And like, I had that just kind of like, ugh, mindset, like I've got this. It's all about hard work, right? It's not, there's a huge portion of bodybuilding that's genetics and straight up genetics. The rest of it below that is basically who can follow directions the best and who can execute. And so we're having a lot of people at a very young age come in and think it's all about just they can jump in and become a bodybuilder like that, super quick. So I have these kids walking up, especially when I was at the gym before I was at now. So I worked at a very like bodybuilder, powerlifter style gym in Fort Worth. It was called Absolute Recomp. And dude, I can't tell you how many 17, 18, 19-year-olds came up to me. Is like, dude, like I'm ready to compete. Where do I get gear? I'm like, bro, like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I just saw your mom drop you off at the gym right now. Like, get the fuck out of here with that. And they're like, no, no, like I train really hard. I'm eating a lot. I just can't put on weight. So I need that extra oomph. And I was like, no, 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 just stop. And like, I'll talk to them. And you know, I'm like, if you want to get big, you need to eat more and you need to train harder. And they're like, no, I train really hard and I eat a lot. I was like, okay, when's the last time you ate? Like, what have you eaten today? It's like, well, I just had breakfast. I'm like, dog, it is 1 p.m. Like, you're not eating enough then. Like,
No.
you're just not even there. You're not even locked in. So I was like, you have a lot of room to grow there. And I was like, I've seen you train. You train like a little bitch. Like, you're not training hard at all. So it's like, there's a big misunderstanding of what it takes to like really be at that high level. And, it's coming from a big portion of our younger people in the community, which is unfortunate, but it's pretty wild right now.
I think that's for like a lot of communities nowadays, just like in careers, in fitness and health. And it's just like they see an immediate, I mean, I'm a victim to it too. Sometimes I see guys and I'm like, man, I want to look like that like tomorrow.
Right.
Like, what do I got to do? Like, I just got to sit in the sauna for a couple hours. It's like, fuck it, I'll do it. But it's like understanding that obviously it's a long-term plan and it takes a lot of work to get there, but it's hard to really see that, and then you need somebody like you that can be like, whoa, let's slow down a little bit, and
Right.
then like this is actually how it works. Like let's work through it, but it's gonna take time. And then they're like, sounds good. I don't really want it that bad. Like, okay, well then you weren't gonna ever get to that point. Like you were never built to get there. Uh, it's kind of cool and also really sad at the same time, and it's kind of, I think on the bodybuilding side you'd see a lot of that, like in an insane amount, because we all, men and women, we see these pictures, especially on Instagram, of these like
Mm-hmm.
super good looking individuals, and we're like, that's it. Like, what do I
Mm-hmm.
got to do to get there? And
Yeah.
we always tend to say, oh, drugs, right?
Yep. 100%. And um, it's to me like it's unfortunate because when I was young, growing up in the industry, it was like, are steroids really a thing? Like they're illegal. Like how do these people even get them? Like it's, it was very taboo. And now there's so much information, there's so much social media to where these guys that are just, especially influencers, TikTok has blown up in the last 5 years, and all these influencers are talking about is gear, and I've coached a few of them, and it's, that's their craft and that's their business essentially, is talking about that kind of thing. But it just kind of sucks to where, I know, because I have a little brother, he's 20, 21 now, and he watches all those guys, and he's like, I want to start a cycle. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. And you're 6'2" and you weigh $140. Like, you're not going to do anything. You're a baseball player. Stop it. Um, but, it's just so easy to see nowadays, and you're aware of it now, that a lot of kids are just like, they're putting two and two together and saying like, okay, step one is start working out. Step two is start taking shit. Whereas before it was there was no one talking about it, and it was very like people were hiding the fact that they were talking about it. So it was step one is start working out, step two is start eating better, step three is start training harder, step four is start eating more, and then like eventually down the road you would get to that point to where you want to step over or not. But now it's so early in everyone's process that it's become easily acceptable because it's all across the board, everyone's doing it.
Do you think that the availability of that information is good for the sport or bad for the sport?
A little bit of both. It's a double-edged sword because I think you're getting a lot more. I mean, especially with what happened, starting in 2020 when we had so many deaths in the bodybuilding industry. There were big names just falling off, and it was awful to see. It felt like every single week, like someone else was just like, there was a black and white photo on my reel, saying date to date, this person passed away. That was a big kind of gut check for everybody. And so the reality of what is going on within the industry definitely got put in the spotlight, which is a good thing. But at the same time, it's everyone's favorite influencer now is talking about what they're taking. And so I think it's good that more information is coming out on the side effects, more information is coming out on, the amounts of these people were taking, and, definitely what a bad area to be in is, what a good area to be in is. But the fact that it is so readily available is leading a lot of people to jump on way too early, in my opinion.
How do people come across finding the drug, right? It's always been an interest to me. Like, there's this weird black market that's widely accepted. I don't know if that's something that you can like, even just like lightly allude to.
Right.
But how do you get started?
I mean, to me, it's like one of two ways, right? And I've seen a bunch of different ways, but the main two are going to be going up to that guy that looks just like a boulder in the gym and asking him, "Hey, bro, what you got for me?" And we had a couple of guys like that in College Station, and you probably know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
that was one strategy. The other way, which is a lot cleaner in my opinion, is just finding a good coach, and then just talking to them about what you're trying to do. And if they're a good coach that cares about your health at all, they're going to lead you in the right direction. All in all, like, it's always better to go through a doctor 100%, and then let them tell you you're being an idiot. But there are just like TRT clinics that'll just give shit to anybody, but at least they'll monitor what's going on.
So all of the extras outside of just testosterone, are those also at TRT clinics that you can get?
Like some are, but majority are not. That's where, you'll have to go searching pretty much. Um, but there are certain compounds that you can get that are labeled as certain types of, hormone replacement therapy.
There
Pretty
seems
wild.
to be there seems to be an insane, like, you hear of all the names, right? And it's just,
Mhm.
it seems like an overwhelming amount of names. And it's also like, how does somebody navigate, oh, I want to start taking growth with test and DECA.
Mhm.
What does that even mean to somebody? Like, from an outside perspective, I'm interested to know, like, what is a good stack? What is a bad stack?
Mhm.
What makes a good or bad stack?
Right.
Um, does do you need, if I'm going to start competing as a novice, do I even need a stack? Like, if I wanted to step on a stage in 6 months, could I get to the point? I know that's genetically based as well, but could I get to the point where I'm at least moderately competitive, that I can feel good about myself and still look better in 6 months?
Right.
Are those realities?
Yeah, it kind of sounds like people just put names on a dartboard and just like start throwing them. It's like, yep, those are my three.
Yep.
Like,
Exactly.
which I think can happen some of the times. But yeah, I mean, um, breaking it down, like to me, um, in my opinion, everybody's first show should be natural, 100%. And just because you have no idea, even if you're going to like the sport. I've had a lot of people that have come in and asked for my coaching, and I turn them away because they're like, yeah, like I just started lifting with them last year and I want to hop on gear. And I'm like, cool, I'm not going to do that for you. So we're going to stay natural, or you can find another coach. And then they, block me or ghost me and they move on to the next person. So it's just something that I believe in. Is like, you don't even know what the sport really is. You haven't gotten down to that level of conditioning. You haven't really competed with yourself yet. So I refuse to put somebody, or work with somebody that's taking that stuff, unless they've actually done it before and they're, really serious about it. And so, whenever we get into it, um, the amateur level, if you're having to take enormous amounts to be competitive, it's not the thing for you. Because, for example, like for me, and I put myself like competitive at the national level, dude. Amateur bodybuilding shows got boring. Like it wasn't even fun for me anymore because it was just no one was showing up in my class. Um, there were competitors there, but like none of them were lean. If they were lean, they weren't big, and so it was just like I kind of walk on stage and then wait for the overall, and like then I had a little bit of competition. National level was different to where okay, there's people at my level of competition. So if you're having to take stuff to get to that amateur level, or if you're competing at the amateur level for the first time and you felt like you need to get on stuff, you're selling yourself short. Number one, because you've just taken your natural genetic potential and you have stunted it. Wherever you were, that's where you made your cutoff. That's where your genetic potential is, and now you're relying on, erogenous hormones to get you the rest of the way. So people need to start finding where their genetic potential is and really maxing it out before jumping on or thinking about jumping on. Number two, they need to go through at least one or two shows to see if they enjoy it. Um, People get 8 months deep, or not 8 months, 8 weeks deep into a prep, and they realize that they don't like being hungry all the time, which is wild to think about because that's like the whole idea of the sport. So you're like, this is really hard. It's like, yeah, no shit, dude. Like that's what it is. And
Yeah.
so, understand the sport and what it really is. It's not just about looking good at the beach. Like guys who look good at the beach are 10% body fat, which is great. We're shooting for like sub 5, which is a very dark place to get. Like it's tough.
It's a scary
So
place, man.
it's a scary place. And so, just understanding what the sport is before they take that leap. And then in order to find like what you said, the right stack, there's a lot of different things that go into it. That's where you have to identify where you're at, and you have to identify what's going to work well with your body. So you kind of have to take baby steps in to where it's like in your off season, you start with a very base level of tests, then you can slowly start adding things in after that. But, in my method of things is be a minimalist, use as little as possible. Don't go into, a test GH, DECA, EQ, anadrol all in your first cycle. Like there's no reason for it. Like you're just throwing all the pills in your mouth and hoping the right ones land. Like that's not how you do it. Like it needs to be calculated. But it's definitely a very complicated world whenever you get into it. And, it takes someone with a very high level of experience and high level of knowledge to be able to take who you are and assess who you are, where you're at, and say, okay, these are the things you need to be taking at these dosages. So
It's like you're almost a chemist, It's
100%.
you're playing with some dangerous hormones, and in too much in excess, all of these things can do some real long-term damage, obviously causing heart attacks and stuff like that. And it seems like you constantly have to be well read in order to be a good coach. And it's kind of a scary place to be as a coach. I control somebody's weights per day, right? And their overall load, and then their injuries and whatever we're doing prehab and rehab long term. You're dealing with somebody's changes in hormones on a day-to-day basis. That just seems so finicky, and per person is also very difficult. You need to have a client who is, I assume you need to have a client who is really like communicative, or are you as a coach being the person who's very communicative? How often do you usually talk to your clients?
Majority, it's at least every other day. At least. And that's been my experience as well. I've always taken my craft very seriously, and so I'm always overly communicative. I'm like, hey, how are you doing today? How are you doing today? And half the time they're like, dude, like I'm fine, we're good, But it's the same idea to where like I have to know what's going on in order to bring the best result out of you. And so I've had experiences to where I've had clients take things behind my back because I won't tell them to take the stuff that they want to take. And they start checking in and they start changing, and their skin color starts to change, and they get more acne, and like there's certain things that are happening to them. Like this shouldn't be happening. And I'm like, okay, what's really going on here? Like, well, I really wanted to do this. So, I went and did this. I'm like, cool. So that's it. I'm out. Good luck with your endeavors. And like, that's it. So it
You'll
takes
fire the client?
100%. Multiple. I've fired multiple clients. I've given them
Damn.
refunds for the entire month. Like, cool, here's your money back. I don't want anything to do with this. Like, if you're not going to listen, then I'm not going to do this because I'm not going to play around with your health. You can. It's your health. But whenever you hire me on to take care of you, I'm going to take care of you. And if you're the person that's getting in the way of that, then that's it.
Good on you, man. That's fucking huge. That's big.
Mm-hmm. And it's happened more times than I like to admit, just because I would think that people would have that as a top priority. But whenever priorities don't align, you're never going to get the job done, right? It's the same for you. Like if you're trying to create a world-class powerlifter, if you're trying to get somebody as strong as they can be, but they want to go out and party every night and drink and do all these things, it's like now you're getting in the way of Ben's success, right? And so, at some point you have to cut ties. So when it comes down to something that serious, I'm not willing to roll those dice. So yeah, that's happened a lot. So that's not a fun time, but it is what it is.
I really like that perspective. They're not just getting in the way of their success, but they're getting in the way of the coach's success as well. That's not something I have ever really thought about. I always say, it's for the client, it's for the client, it's for the client. But I'm in this too, And yeah. I think as coaches, we have to remember that. I mean, just across the board, all coaches need to remember that. That's a really cool note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's something huge in the bodybuilding world. And like, you see two different types of coaches. One is the coach that is kind of just like the money guy who's in it for the money, and they want to just turn clients over, and no matter what they look like, they'll put them on stage. Then you have coaches that want to put out a good product, right? And so those are the type of coaches to where they don't put people on stage unless they're ready. And so I've had people where they've gotten close to that, date that we set. And it's like, dude, like, you're just not ready. And so we have to push it back or we have to restart because mentally they can't handle being that depleted. Like, I will not put somebody on stage that's not ready to be on stage. It's not going to be competitive because that's essentially my product. That's my name I'm putting out on stage. And I want to make sure that they have success and they have the experience they want. But at the end of the day, if I'm putting out clients that don't look good, that's going to look bad on me. And not to say that, they weren't big enough. It's more so the level of conditioning because I can't control someone's body structure. I can't control anatomically the way that they are shaped, but I can control how lean they are, and I can control how full and how tight they came out on stage. And so that's the certain thing that I'm talking about, to where coaches will put people on stage that are 12% body fat, and that sticks out like a sore thumb. And then they go out and they blast on social media, oh, this is my coach, we did great, da 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 da. Like, well, that wasn't a very good presentation of the coach at that point. It's like, we're really happy for the athlete, but then everyone has their eyes on that coach saying, what do the rest of your athletes look like? And so that's where you see the difference between someone who actually takes this very seriously and is going to bring the athlete where they need to be. And if the athlete is getting in the way of that, they're going to reassess, take them out of that show, and then lead them into a better show.
Have you pulled people out of shows before?
100%. Mm-hmm.
And are you waiting until like the last week that you're just like, okay, like maybe like we're not there, or is it the last couple weeks? Like, how do you time and how do you decide you're not ready?
Most of the time I catch it pretty early because the people that aren't going to make it to stage start showing those red flags, if you will, very early. So it's the people that are like, okay, we're 3 weeks in, we're a month in, and I'm going over. I send them my text saying, I have basically like a parent sheet, and they have to answer all these questions. And how well did you follow the program? Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you didn't follow at all, 10 being every single meal, every timing was spot on. They see me an 8. Okay, what happened? Why wasn't it a 10? It's like, well, I went out with my family and I ended up having, a steak and fries rather than my ground beef and rice meal. It's like, okay, why? Like, well, I just want to enjoy my time, yada, yada, yada. I was like, okay, we have a conversation about it. Don't let it happen again. A week down the road, same thing. A week down the road, the same thing. And it's like, now I can see the progression. Their weight that they were supposed to be at, we're behind, 3 or 4 pounds. They're coming in softer every check-in. The lines aren't coming through. At that point, I'm like, okay, it's not even about you, the way you physically look. You are not mentally ready for this. And so we need to take a step back. We don't need to commit to the show that's now happening in 8 weeks. We need to re-lock you in and then pick a different show. So that's an early catch. And those happen way more often than the other ones. The other ones that happen are from 1 or 2 ways. One, injury or something crazy happens. I have one client, and he's actually about ready to compete. He was supposed to compete last year, and he was a new hire. Actually, you know him, Zane.
Oh, nice.
Big Zane, yeah. So last
Yeah.
year he was supposed to compete, and I had him damn near ready. He was looking the best that he's ever looked. And that weekend, he just got hired on as a firefighter at a new station, and they were like, being a rookie, you have to work this weekend, and that was the weekend of his show. And he had to work the next weekend. That was the weekend of the next show. And we were like, dude, like,
Damn.
I don't want to have you stage ready for 2 months. It's just not healthy for you. You're not going to get anything out of it. And I was like, this is where you're at right now. I think we could do some damage at nationals, but we need to work on certain areas. So we decided to come out of that show, go through the off season. Now he's getting ready for this one to where he has a little bit more freedom. He has second year, he can put in those days off. And so now we can guarantee that. So that was just kind of like a freak thing that happens. Another thing that happens, like injury. It's like, okay, I don't want you to push through that. So let's take you out. The second is very unfortunate. And that's where we get down the road, we're a month out and they just have that dog day that everybody has, and they break mentally and they go into their kitchen cabinet, or they go to their favorite Wendy's right down the road and they just pig the fuck out. And it's unfortunate to see because, number one, it's like you were so close, like you were right there, Um, but the underlying issue with that is there's definitely a mental side going on that we need to address. So some people, it's like one cheat and they can get over it and it's okay. It doesn't mess up their look, and mentally they check out just fine. But like, you really have to sit down with them and have a conversation with them and become their therapist. It's like, why did you do that? And if their reasoning is that their cravings are just so strong that they needed to have it, like, there's something else going on with you, man. Like, it's not just competing and getting tired and feeling like you needed more food. Like, there's something inside of you that's actually creating an unhealthy relationship with the food, that's putting it as a priority up here along with like survival, which is not where you want to be. Because if we go through with this show and I continue pushing you, and then all of a sudden when you're done with the show, you're going to have all this freedom in the world, I have no idea what type of bomb is going to go off, and you're going to, pig out and eat all this food, and or you're going to go the opposite way and you're going to want to keep that level of conditioning and you're not going to eat anything. So there's definitely that mental side of it that everyone has to be aware of as well.
That is a fear that I've always had with the sport from the outside, and I've always been a little bit worried that it promotes that kind of mentality, like that level of body dysmorphia and the unhealthy relationships with food and with the gym, and it's supposed to be a beautiful place where you're supposed to better yourself and make these gains, and not just for your mind but for your body. And you get to the point where you're trying to reach that 5% body fat.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, it can, some people are built for it. Like some people are just that level of a competitor, and they can revert, they can compartmentalize. This meat prep time, and this is what it's going to take of me. But once I get out of this, I'm back to normal. Like, I can have a beer, I can have 2 beers, and it's fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I worry that that there are people that are trying to push to get to that point that aren't really suited for that.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you make sure, and how does that conversation go when you have that client, you're talking to them like, yo man, like, what does this relationship with food look like, and how do you navigate it?
So I had to learn that one early on. I would say I think they were like my second or third person I put on stage, which is really unfortunate because they were like very, very close friend of mine. And I was aware of it, but like in my own experience with competing, I wasn't aware of it. I knew it happened, but I was like, okay, like I can lock in and not eat a single gram of food outside of, the diet that's given to me. I didn't drink alcohol for like 3 years straight. I had like zero mess ups. I don't cheat. I don't take in extra food. And when I'm done with my show, I can go out and I can eat. I'll get fat. I'll go through my post-show blues process, but like I understand, like, okay, you got to get lean, then you got to grow, you got to get lean, you got to grow. I understand that process. And so to me, like, I was aware of it, but it wasn't real until I had, my first client that went through it. They went through their prep. They did wonderful. They placed well. And so I'm trying to reverse them, and I'm talking to them about food, and they're checking in, and they're just staying lean, and they're staying lean. And, they're telling me their weight is going up, and like, I'm not seeing it through the picture. So I'm like, okay, send me a picture of your scale. And they're like, well, my scale is broken. I'll have to get it, next week, and da da da. I'm like, then go to the gym and take a picture of the scale. Like, find the scale. Like, I need to see your weight right now. And they're like, okay, I'm actually, still right around their stage weight. And I was like, okay, well, one, why are you lying to me? Why are you saying, you're 5, 6, 7 pounds up from stage when you're the same weight? Like, well, I just really like the way that I look right now. It's like, okay, but, you're not healthy. Like, you're still stage ready. Your body is not in a good spot. Like, you need to eat. They're like, okay. So I gave them, I was like, okay, go eat a burger and fries right now. When you wake up for breakfast, go eat some pancakes. Like, enjoy yourself. Like, you did great. You deserve that. Go ahead and eat some food. Check in with me on this day. Cool. Didn't check in. So I'm trying to get in contact with the person now, and they're just like ghosting me. So I completely lost control of that person, and it was way too late. So now I have certain protocols, when people are coming out of a show, to where, number one, like, they're sending me pictures of the scale, not a number in a text. Like, I need to see that number. Number two, like when I tell them to go eat cheat meals and stuff like that, again, I have them send me pictures. Send me, and I make it fun. It's like, dude, like send me a picture of you eating it. Like I want to see the big smile on your face, like all that. But in reality, like it's an actual fear of mine now to where I'm like, okay, you got to get out there. You got to get some food in you because, we got to get you back up to a healthy state. And I've had a few people that I'm able to kind of identify that with earlier on to where they're putting a lot more value in the way that they look, you know? And so I do a couple things with people that I kind of have an idea of who's struggling with it. And so I tell them to send me like different words of affirmation for themselves. And, I make them tell me a few things that they're grateful for. And, if all of these things are coming off of like the way that they look and, the vein that they're having popping out of their arms, their legs, I'm like, okay. So then I start having conversations with them. Okay, but outside of you physically, like, what are you grateful for? And we have to start transitioning into putting value in things outside of their physical shape. Because so many times people will identify themselves as the way that they look, which is unfortunate because like outside of being a bodybuilder, like people are so much more. Their brothers, their sisters, their husbands, their fathers, their mothers, wives, like whatever you are, like that's what you have to have value in, what's actually important. And in bodybuilding, very, very quickly you can get lost in just how you look, which is crazy.
The level of care that you go through, like I'm sitting here getting chills, man. Like it's what I think we all needed as young athletes, and
Mhm.
you are doing the work that young new athlete's gonna absolutely need. Like,
Mhm.
and not even just the young athlete, but any athlete that's coming to you to approach it that way. I mean, hearing about that athlete that you kind of lost control of it, it's kind of it's a little sad, and but I think it made you into a better person. Like I can't imagine being an athlete and or being the coach and seeing that and kind of like, oh shit, what do I do now?
Mhm.
And you learn from it, and now you've created some steps in order to prevent that from happening again.
Mhm.
Have you been able to talk to that athlete since?
Yeah, and I mean they're doing fine. Like they actually just competed a little bit ago. They we kind of went different directions. Um, we were still friends for a really long time after that, and they just had no interest in competing. Obviously, because they became aware of what was going on. They got the help that they needed,
Good.
and then we kind of lost touch a little bit. But they ended up going off. They found a different coach and they competed. So I hope everything is going well now because that was very recent. Um, that's something I'll have to. It's been on my mind for a while. Just like, man, like I hope everything's okay. Um, but I don't want to overstep anything. So we're doing fine. Back on stage, crushing it. So happy to
Good,
see
man.
that. Yeah.
I want to know. So as a powerlifting coach, I write somebody's workouts for the day, but you're writing all of it. You're writing food. You're writing dietary. You're giving meal prep. You're giving your workouts. I want to know about like what food regimens you kind of write per like stage, I guess, and then also how those workouts relate to that food prep.
Yeah. So it's it's very, like I said, with bodybuilding, it's very touchy, right? So number one, it's based off of what foods do they like eating and balancing that with the foods they actually need to eat in order to, create that success. Because I've had, early on, I was very stubborn and I was like, no, like these are the foods we're going to eat. I don't care if you don't like them, like throw up in your mouth if you need to, swallow it back down and like get after it. Like, I was trying to be hardcore and like no one made it to stage and I'm like, what's going on? You know? Um, but very quickly matured and I'm like, okay, not everybody works like you. Like they actually need to enjoy like what they're eating. So it's just like playing that balancing act between making sure that they're happy, making sure that they can actually get the food down because that's what's most important, and then pairing it with what they actually need to be doing. So when it comes to training, I always like to have people for an off season first before, we jump into prep. So it's always very baseline. I have them send me videos of like their workouts that I have them do. And it's pretty much everyone starts off with like push pull legs. Push pull legs arms is like the very basic thing to do for my first time. Then I assess like where their weak spots are, where they're growing, where they're not growing, where their form needs checking, and then I put in, basically a 2 days on, 1 day off, or 3 days on, 1 day off, depending on their recovery. And I go into very, very specific type of weight training regimens where now we have their, weak points we're hitting a little bit more often throughout the week. I calculate how many sets we're doing, and we need to make sure those weak points we're bringing them up. And then if they have something that's just growing like insane, like with Mitri, my most recent one, his legs are just insane. And if he thought about growing his legs, they would grow an inch. And like it just didn't need those to grow because with classic, it's all about proportions and making sure we're maintaining, balance through the whole physique. So he honestly just started begging me. He was like, dude, can I hit legs again? Because like I told him like, don't hit legs till I tell you. And it was a month later, and he's like, can I please hit legs? And I was like, cool. This is your one leg workout for the month, so enjoy it. Um, so that's a kind of odd place in bodybuilding as well. To like with training, you have to balance that out and kind of sacrifice what a lot of people enjoy training, because if it's a strong point, I mean, you're gonna want to hit that.
Yeah.
He loves doing leg press. He loves doing squats. And I'm like, dude, like, sorry, you can't, which is a terrible thing to say to an athlete. You can't do what you love to do, but if you want to succeed, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Now with the food side of it, that's where, I have them send me a list of what foods are you allergic to. Obviously, we're not going to throw anything of that. Do you have any sort of food allergies or food sensitivities? Address all that stuff. And then we go through, okay, what are just some no-nos to where like, even if I put them in your program, like you're just going to, dry you just by looking at it. So I have a couple people, they're like, I can't stomach fish, which is fine. A lot of people think like fish is a go-to. You have to have it. It makes your skin thinner and like all those theories and like all these like weird things that are thrown out there. Like, it's not. It's just a leaner protein. Like you're going to get less fat out of tilapia than you are chicken or beef. So it's just a calorie deficit at that point.
Yeah.
So, identify all those things, and I pair making sure their macro breakdown matches what they need in order to still perform, and then create that calorie deficit after that. And then I go through and I take a look at all those foods, what type of micronutrients they're bringing in, and, what do we have to supplement because they're not getting enough of, all that stuff. So it's very, very intuitive. It's very tedious.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. I kind of want to like, I don't know if you do it on an Excel sheet, but I want to see your Excel sheet and how
Yeah.
you're like looking at like each one of these individual meals and how you're weighing them out and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You said earlier you're like constantly hungry. That is the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really like are you constantly hungry?
100%, dude. Yeah.
That sucks.
So like, so obviously like in off season, you have to push, it's total opposites, right? And so I actually enjoy being in prep than I do being in off season, because in off season, it was just like, I always felt like my stomach was full all the way to my throat. I couldn't get down. I couldn't stomach another meal. And like, it would take me an hour to get through a meal sometimes, just because I'm just like, spoonful, like this is terrible. And then when you get into prep, like you have a good happy medium to where you're like, finally I get to take the foot off the gas, and I get to like actually like lower these meal amounts, because I was eating probably 6 to 7 ounces of a certain meat, anywhere from 300 to 400 grams of rice, and then like a giant spoonful of peanut butter, 6 to 7 times a day. And it was just awful. It's terrible. So when you get to lower that, it's like, yay, everyone throws a party. And then 2 months in, you realize, holy shit, I'm hungry. I want that food back. So it's the last like month for me is when it kind of tends to get a little bit rough. But I also have, very fast metabolism. So my food intake compared to a lot of other athletes' food intake is a lot higher. I get to eat a lot of food at the end. But either way, with how much output you're doing, with how hard you should be training, how much cardio you're doing, I'm eating... I was eating in the range of about 200, 300 carbs, depending on high or low day still. And dude, I would eat, and I was way hungry after I was done eating the meal than I was before. And so it's just like constantly being in a level of not satisfied and depleted and tired. It's pretty wild, but um, going through it, it teaches a lot of things. It teaches discipline, it teaches mental toughness. Those last couple of weeks, you get that brain fog and having to work, do your job, do your life, take care of your relationships, take care of the people around you. It gets really, really tough. But at the end of the day, like once you go through it, you accomplish what you set out to accomplish. It's awesome. It's a great experience.
Do you ever follow any of the, or like employ any of these fad diets of any types, like the carnivore diet or any others, keto, anything like that?
Hell no.
Cool.
um, you're like, awesome, sweet. I just, number one, like, I haven't done enough research on those yet to be able to implement it. And then number two, like with carnivore, with keto, I don't think it would work on getting that person down to that level of conditioning alongside that level of performance. Because, I mean, at the end of the prep, at the end of everyone's, cut cycle, they're down to very, very lean. There's not a lot of carb to it. Their fats are typically at a pretty moderate way, but then their proteins are really, really high. So if you talk to Mitri, like he wasn't a carnivore diet because he was only eating meat at the end and then like a little bit of vegetables, but like that was it. I haven't gone into it that much to where like long term would that be effective for a bodybuilder. And then keto, I've had people like want to try and do keto. I'm like, that's great. We've tried it at a very high level, high performance. It's just like not sustainable. They kind of shut down. Their body stops progressing. And so then we have to push way too hard with cardio. We have to push way too hard with the training to where then their recovery starts to suffer. And then I'm just like, I got to do more research. I got to be able to understand this better if we're going to try that. So no, I don't do any sort of fad diet.
That's fair. How much time do you spend doing cardio? And towards the end, you're saying it's a lot of cardio. Like how many hours are you in the gym, and how much cardio are you doing?
So it depends, and for everyone, I think it depends on like where they're at in their journey. For my personal experience, my first show, and this was me being very, very new in the industry, coaching myself. So please, nobody judge me. I was doing 2-a-days, 6 days a week, meaning training sessions. So me and Nick Gonzalez, we were doing the same show. Wake up, we'd be at the gym at 6 a.m. We'd go back at like 5 or 6 p.m. And then after each session, I would do about 45 minutes cardio. So I was doing an hour and a half until the last about 2 weeks. And I upped it to 2 hours a day of cardio. Our gym sessions were anywhere from like hour to hour and a half. As that progressed, it slowly got less and less. So my highest cardio stuck around that hour and a half point, and that was for my first 3 shows. And that was just because I had done zero research. I had no knowledge of like what recovery does for you. So I was training 6 days a week. I was training, I would say medium. I thought I was training hard, but it was just like a lot of volume and just, flailing around like a maniac all the time. There wasn't a lot of like method to the madness my first couple of years. And then, so my cardio just had to be high to get that level of conditioning. As we progressed, as my coach got to know me better and as I got to know training better, I actually dialed back my training to no more than about an hour worth of a strength training session. So typically 45 minutes to an hour. But my sets were to pretty much like the proximity to failure there, like actual real failure was very close, pretty much every single set. But my total sets for each workout were maybe 5. On a big day, like maybe 6. But that was it. The rest of it were either like back down sets or warm-up sets, and that was it. So the overall training volume went way down. My
Wow.
frequency went from 6 days a week to four, maybe five. I was on like a 2-1 split where I was training 2 days in a row, taking one day off. And my food was a lot higher. And I was doing my highest cardio sessions for my last 3 shows were 30 minutes at a time. And that was like 5, 6 days a week, not 7. So
Wow.
recovery plays a huge factor in being able to get that lean.
Can I ask you why? What is the rationale?
Yeah. So what you're looking at there is, your body being able to do what it needs to do. So whenever you're putting that high of stimulus throughout your body, whenever your body is that fatigued, your body is not going to work optimally, right? So the idea there was, you basically have to push your body to the limit to be able to create that level of conditioning. So your progression, or your rather regression of calories, and then your progression of cardio has to be very aggressive and has to be very consistent. What we're doing now was we're creating a lot of that intensity, a lot of that calorie burning through our training. And so we're going into the gym, we're creating that growth response internally by creating a very, very high stimulus. But that's all we're doing is we're stimulating, we're not annihilating. So if we're stimulating that muscle to break down a little bit and grow, right, our body is going to have to go through that process and actually be able to utilize calories to grow more muscle tissue. And then with that, our calorie deficit is going to be a lot greater, a lot more consistent. And so my food's able to stay higher because my stimulus is right at the right spot to where my body is turning over nutrients and to try and build more tissue. And then my food and my cardio are just creating that last little gap that's needed.
Recovery, baby. Hell yeah.
Recovery. It's a wild, isn't it?
I
And then you
love it.
train harder the whole way, you train heavier the whole way, and you don't feel like shit all the time. It's great.
I think I think all of us starting off in like high school, we're just like fucking hours in the gym, more squats,
Dude,
more benches, like just do it all. Gonna go run, gonna go do everything, Like even and the more that we get along, the more experience we get, we can save ourselves some headache, and then also save other people from like trying that lifestyle and knowing that
yes,
it's not gonna work.
yes. I can't tell you how many like younger kids I have like saved from going through that phase of just like CT Fletcher, like 100 rep sets, and like I'm just gonna like force this body to grow. And I'm like, guys, like I know it sounds cool and I know it looks awesome, and the man is the man. I was like, but just take my advice and like only train 5 days a week and see what happens. And then, they immediately see a response. They're like, oh, my bench went up this much. I'm like, imagine that. So,
Less is more in a lot of ways, I mean, I think that's all sports, like we need sleep. We need to like give our bodies and minds some rest and some break. And I always thought I thought you were spending like I was expecting like 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day. But it's kind of nice to hear that it's not so much. I think what sounds the hardest is going to be that food, that intake. That seems like the most difficult in my mind. How do you program? What does your volume look like in a day, right? How are you calculating like total tonnage, or are you going off percentages? Are you going off of RPEs? Like, how are you writing training?
yeah, so I break it down based off of what they've been doing, and then I slowly typically end up regressing their volume. Because just like you said, most of the time people are just banging it out, and everyone has that same mentality towards like to be a bodybuilder, you got to be in it 4 hours a day. You got to go and you got to train 2 a days, and like people have all these crazy mindsets on what proper training is, and so I typically have to take that and break it down first. So I break it down as like total working sets, and so if someone comes in, they tell me, I'm doing, 8 different exercises, 5 sets of 12 each, and like all this. I'm like, okay, that's, X amount of total sets, per day. And then X amount of total sets per week. And so then I try to average it out, like how many times would it be, or how many sets would it be per day if I want you only training 5 days? And then I just slowly regress it. but I have them doing a different structure. So typically they're doing straight sets or drop sets is the trend right now, right? I take all drop sets out because I want to save those for, whenever we hit a plateau. I want intensifiers to be utilized properly and not just as like an everyday thing, which a lot of people do. So if they're doing, let's say 30 sets in a workout, I typically drop it down by like 10%, right? So now they're coming in, they're doing 27. And then 2 weeks later, I drop it down again. I drop it down again until I get into that happy medium to where like they understand what real intensity is. They really understand what that proximity to failure looks like. Because I really push them to say, okay, you have one set in the gym, and I want you to imagine that one set, after you're done, the gym owner turns lights out, you have to go. And that should be enough to be still a good workout. You should still create a growth response within that one set. And so when they grasp that mentality, it's like, okay, that's what training hard looks like. That's what it feels like. Tunnel vision, almost blacking out, vomiting after that first set. Yeah, that's what it feels like sometimes. And so once they understand that, they can do that 3 or 4 times. That real like Dorian Yates blood and gut style of training, and they're done. And they realize, oh shit, that was 45 minutes, and I'm done, and I don't have to stay here, 3 times that amount. And I did more for my body than I did in that giant training set. So that's what
I want to try one of your workouts.
Come on, man.
I feel like we could do. I'll go to Houston. I mean, Houston's not too far away.
Mm-hmm.
I'll trade you a workout session. That sounds like fun.
Hell yeah.
Oh, so you're professionally. We're going to come to a close here pretty soon. So, what you said you're a fitness manager over in Houston. Are you still doing that?
Yep. So right now I'm over Crunch Fitness in Cyprus. I helped open the gym in Katy. So it's basically a franchise that started out in California. And they have tons of clubs. They wanted to move to the Texas market right after COVID because they saw a big opportunity with all the 24s we had in the area that closed down. So they bought out like 3 different 24s, gutted them, renovated them, and opened them back up as Crunches. And so right now I'm the top fitness manager in the district. So I'm working towards trying to get that like district level position to where I just oversee multiple clubs at once.
Sounds like a pretty damn good setup there. You're moving along from fitness consultant at Golds to fitness, or not even fitness consultant. Yeah, fitness consultant to Gold, right? So now fitness manager for Crunch. Mm-hmm. That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you?
Find me on Instagram, classic_giant killer, and then that's pretty much the only platform I use. Follow me. Like my shit, message me if you need anything. I got you.
So if I'm a new lifter and I just like, hey man, I'm interested in some training, I can just send you a DM and be like, what are we looking at for XYZ? What kind of stuff do you offer? I mean, do you offer just nutrition, just training, both together? What kind of services do you offer?
Yeah, so I do like my most one-off is going to be like posing. That's the most like unique that I offer, and that's obviously just for like bodybuilders, but for Gen Pop, for, anything else, like I offer training specifically if they just want like a training programs. I offer nutritional programs, and then I offer one-on-one like monthly coaching, which would be the whole shebang. I'm taking care of your diet, taking care of your training, supplementation the whole time. Just remember, I take it seriously. We're checking in week by week. I'm talking to you every day. We're going to become best friends.
You're not going to leave them alone. They're like,
exactly.
That's cool, man. So posing is would you say your niche?
100%. Yeah. That's what got me into bodybuilding, because I wasn't sure about stepping up on stage on a mankini, but like, I really enjoyed the overall like presentation of everything and how you can turn just something that's so brute like and turning it into like a form of art. And, that's my passion behind it is always going to be posing. I love the training, but the posing where it's at for me. And, being able to take somebody's like vision and turn that into a reality that they can actually, translate with their own bodies is really cool.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Well, thanks for your time. I'm going to shut that off real quick. And I'm going to talk to you after, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
No worries.